Hey folks, this is Ardwulf, and this is Traveler Tuesday. Today we're going to have a look at the Imperial Navy Sourcebook for Mongoose Publishing, Traveler 2nd Edition. This book has been available in PDF for quite a while, but it is now available for physical order as well. So let's check it out. All right, so we will be looking at the digital version while I wait for the physical copy to arrive. We see that we have a 184-page book here with a pretty nice-looking minimalist cover. This is kind of a classic Traveler thing to have minimalist covers. At some point, I'll do a video on that. This particular book is written by Martin Doherty, who is a stalwart Traveler writer. So let us get started here. When we talk about the Imperial Navy, we get an introduction. This is the senior service of the Third Imperium, of course, and this obviously does support the official Traveler universe as well. And I don't know, although we've had things about the Navy and a lot of different Traveler products over the years, I don't know that there's ever been an actual Imperial Navy source book before. So we get an overview here. We get some information on peacetime fleet structure and Imperial Navy formations. I can see where that would be useful. A historical perspective. Here is the history of the Navy of the Third Imperium, which includes quite a bit of material here, all the way from the beginnings of the Third Imperium. Actually, starts with the First Imperium, the Villani Imperium, and runs all the way through the Fourth Frontier War. And then we have a little sidebar on commissioned and enlisted personnel. Chapter on the role of the Navy. What does the Navy actually do in both peacetime and wartime? Law enforcement and internal security. This is kind of a complex topic in the official Traveler universe. The Imperium, as a rule, does not normally govern worlds. It governs the space between worlds, which does include starports, but normally individual worlds are more or less completely autonomous. Nevertheless, there are certain imperial laws that those worlds must abide by, and enforcement of that is left up to the Navy. So I guess Americans might think of it as a combination of Navy and Coast Guard. We also have diplomacy and soft power projection, protection of commerce, anti-piracy activities, that kind of thing, intervention in peacekeeping, and then, of course, war fighting. Fighting an interstellar war is the next chapter, how an interstellar war might proceed. If one intends to use the upcoming Fifth Frontier War material as a backdrop for a Traveler campaign, this chapter might prove incredibly valuable. We got material on that. Organization. This is actually what excited. This is going to sound weird, but this material is what actually excited me the most about this particular book. How is the Imperial Navy organized? This actually explains that. We have the regular Navy, the Imperial Core Fleet, Colonial Fleet, Reserve Fleet, local defense forces, and then how the Army and Marines relate to those different branches of the Imperial Navy. And we've got reserve categories here as well. Political direction of the Navy, flotillas, squadrons, and task forces. This breaks organization of the Navy down sort of by level. So you have the Imperial level, the domain level. A domain of the Third Imperium is sort of this 4-sector or so sized area that is notionally governed by an archduke, or at least there's an archduke there. Worlds, again, are mostly autonomous, all the way down to sectors, subsectors, and individual systems. Over here, we have a section on fleets. Good to know what fleet composition will look like. If, for example, I mean, just a cool color encounter might be, okay, you, the free trader, are traveling through a system, and there's an Imperial subsector fleet passing through that system at the same time. That's kind of a cool color encounter. Maybe there's some interaction there, and maybe there's not. That's up to you as the referee. We have glory fleets, handling fleets, conduct of war, fleet command. This talks about the admiralty, what the responsibilities of the different levels of admirals are. As you would expect, there are several different levels of admirals as well as commodores, squadrons, and flotillas. Available assets. This talks about different levels of ship that might be available in terms of like displacement tonnage anyway. So capital ships, cruisers, destroyers, and escorts, and then support vessels. Chapter on naval bases. This is actually nice. Naval bases are scattered throughout the Third Imperium. There's a whole bunch of them in the Spinward Marches, for example. Well, I don't know if the whole bunch, I'm not sure what the actual number is, but there are multiple naval bases in the Spinward Marches in Imperial territory. This chapter should give us some insight as to how those naval bases work. This also talks about naval depots, which are kind of a super naval base. There's usually one per sector, as I recall, and these are like major Imperial shipyards and stuff like, and supply bases and stuff like that. We have ships and craft, okay? So we have three different terms here that get defined: craft, ship, and vessel. Capital vessels include super dreadnoughts, battleships, battle cruisers, battle riders, which is basically a battle cruiser or battleship that doesn't have jump capability. It relies on a jump tender to get it where it needs to go. Those have been floating around in Traveler since the mid-'80s or so. Fighting ships, Classic Traveler Supplement fighting ships talked about that. Here are cruisers. There are light cruisers, heavy cruisers, frontier cruisers, strike cruisers, missile cruisers, rift cruisers. That's interesting. Escort cruisers and reconnaissance cruisers. The cruiser is traditionally, I think, in Traveler, kind of the idea is that it's a ship that is big enough to be self-sufficient, but also can be a component of a fleet. We also have carriers and tenders. Tenders we just mentioned. We also have destroyers and escorts in a number of different classes and specializations. Corvettes, which are pretty small ships. They are almost maybe PC sort of sized ships. We have courier vessels, logistics and supply vessels. Good to see that, because that's a real thing, right, that you would have. Planetary attack vessels for assaults and things like that. Specialized vessels. Non-starships, which has a discussion of riders and monitors. Monitors are basically big floating gun platforms. Fighters and utility craft. Small combat craft. Okay, that's a lot of material on the different types of vessels that we might see on Imperial Navy ships. Here's a chapter on naval operations. Standing operational orders, deployments, patrols, guard duty, anti-piracy work, intelligence gathering, raids and strikes. A lot of very interesting looking. Haven't read this material yet, but there's a lot of really interesting looking material here that will be really good to know. And we now actually have a book on how to do naval campaigns and how to, and several adventures tailored for naval campaigns. There's a component of that that's actually part of the Pirates of Drenax as well. Without spoiling anything, I'll tell you that this information might be useful. Shipboard operations. We have branches and departments. So how is like a ship organized internally? Roles aboard a starship. Here is a cigar-smoking Vargur in what looks like a bellhop's outfit with sidearm. The flight department, engineering department, technical, gunnery, crew. Here's a talk about the chain of command. That's good to know. Command procedures. Wonder what research went into doing this. Were there real-world models that were used as the basis for this information? Routine security, boarding and inspections, subordinates, personal weapons. What are their side? Does everybody have a sidearm at all times? This will tell you. Ship handling, transponder operations and system movement, jump procedures. Interesting to know this. I mean, a free trader or scout courier is not going to be beholden to this sort of structure, but it's kind of cool to know how the fleet does it. Pursuit jumps. Some discussion of different weapons systems and tactics. Rules of engagement. That's cool that there is a discussion of rules of engagement. To be honest about it, that could have gotten an entire chapter. I feel like I could have used more information on rules of engagement. Anybody who's been in the service knows that the rules of engagement are amply covered. Naval tactics, next chapter here, line of battle, small craft and escort tactics. To some extent, Traveler starship combat is modeled after Age of Sail ship combat. So I would expect this to lean into that fairly heavily. We've got some diagrams here. That's pretty cool. 3-axis control on the vessels. Fleet and missile defense. There better be an explanation of these diagrams. But it's cool that this is here. Threat axis and flanks. Missiles in hunt mode. Yeah, there are descriptive notes on a lot of this. These might warrant some study. This is actually really neat. I like that they gave you diagrams like this. Here's equipment and weaponry, discussion of that as it applies to the Navy. I feel like much of this is maybe not something I needed in this particular book, maybe something that would have fit better in a Starship Operator's Manual. But upon reading it, I might change my mind on that. This does talk about weapon systems, including spinal mounts, which is not something you're going to find in a ship that travelers are going to be flying around in most of the time, as well as bay weapons, which are generally restricted to larger ships as well. Defensive systems include sandcasters. No discussion of black globes here. That's interesting. Sandcasters and point defense weapon systems include energy weapons, missiles and torpedoes, projectile weapons, uniforms and vac suits. That's cool that that's here. Okay, good. We have pictures of the uniforms and vac suits. I don't know that I guess that's the duty suit, so that is what people are actually walking around in. I feel like they're a little too utilitarian. They're little unmilitary looking. I don't see pictures so far, anyway, of the uniforms. Personal weapons and equipment. We've got Navy model sidearms. That's actually pretty cool. That Navy model Gauss pistol looks really friggin' bulky. And I think the artist who drew it probably has never actually handled a handgun because of the way that trigger is set up. Even the Navy model 9mm here is a little bulky looking, but that Gauss pistol looks super duper bulky. We've got snub weapons. We've got snub submachine guns. That's interesting. Advanced combat rifles. That looks fine. I have no problem with the way that looks at all. Combat carbines and cutlasses. We have officer dress swords. High guard. The high guard section is generally ship stuff, right? So here we have maximum sizes on batteries, some notes on crew size, which is interesting. That's going to be different. It should be anyway. It should be different from what the crew expectations would be on, say, a free trader. Here's some stuff on personnel where it talks about the different ranks. These uniforms don't look like that duty uniform to me. At least this Space Hand recruit uniform maybe doesn't. Again, I feel like these look a little too baggy. So here's a discussion of petty officers. I do like that they gave us pictures of all these. That's actually pretty cool. Looks like there's a couple different colors here too. At least this senior chief petty officer is in what appears to be a different color uniform. Junior officers, cadets. I mean, this dude's obviously, out in the field somewhere because he's wearing a down jacket. Sub-lieutenant, ensign, and lieutenant, a droid lieutenant, no less. Not sure what the population of droid lieutenants in the Imperial Navy is. I'd be very curious to see a discussion of that. Field grade officers, man, I'm not loving these uniforms either. These look like love boat uniforms to me. Flag officers look slightly better, slightly. The sector admiral actually looks pretty cool. We got what looks like an Aslan sector admiral. That's actually pretty neat. The Grand Admiral, I'm not sure I'm loving these illustrations, but it's cool that they're here. Here's a discussion again of the Admiralty reservists. That's actually cool that that's in here. Promotion, that's good to know. This might color, for example, the fact that your character got promoted in the Navy in character creation. Recruitment, that's cool to know. Navy life, Navy families, specialist services, very interesting. The Frozen Watch. I'd need to take a look at how low berths work in Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition. In the Classic Traveler, I forget what the actual role was to fail to wake up alive from your low berth slot. The fatality rate on those is just way too low. There's no way any decent society would accept that rate of mishap. So I feel like it's got to be that's something that I would definitely want to fix up. If Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition hasn't done that, it's another rule that I need to review. All right, staff duty, medals and rewards. We get Starburst for extreme heroism, meritorious conduct under fire, medal for conspicuous gallantry. I feel like there should be more of these, but it's cool that they're here. These decorations, and actually that's something that you could use out of character creation too. Leaving the Navy, also cool that is discussed. Naval procedures. Terms of address, orders, naval discipline, the Old Expanses sector fleet. So this looks like an examined example of a fleet in action. Here is some maps. So we have the Old Expanses sector. And looking at this, all the stars are not in here. These are only the stars that contain naval bases. And then on the left, we have kind of the Old Expanses in context. Okay, bases, sector fleet assets. Here's the actual fleet composition. This is cool to see. This gives us numbers of different ships. There's a key here. I feel like this information could be presented more concisely, but this is an attractive way to do it. The Boole contingent, the Crush contingent. So this is a big fleet here, folks. I mean, it is a sector fleet after all, right? Here's the Sourcebook subsector fleet. Okay, this is interesting as well. And here's is this in Old Expanses? Yes, the Sourcebook subsector is in the Old Expanses. So we get a look at a subsector fleet here as well. So we got a couple of different task forces, a response flotilla, and a whole bunch of patrol vessels, which look like escort destroyers and or corvettes. That's pretty cool. Here's an article on the Tigris class dreadnought, one of the classic big traveler ships. I think it originally appeared in, again, the classic Traveler volume fighting ships, but I could be mistaken about that. We get a whole bunch of info on the Tigris. This is an enormous 300,000 ton ship, as I recall. 500,000 tons. Maybe I misremembered the number, or maybe they revised it. Either one of those things is a possibility. Massively armed. Obviously, this 500,000 tons here. This is a huge ship. It's got what looks like 2,500 or so people on it, maybe more than that. It's got 366,000 hull points. This is maybe not the biggest ship in space in the official Traveler universe, but it's right up there, and it might be the biggest ship of the line. Let me put it that way. There have been mentions of million-ton fleet tenders in the past. I'm not sure I've ever actually seen those in a book. Okay, as you can see, it's not an incredibly photogenic ship, and I'm not sure that a Navy would paint their ships blue either, but that's, that's just me. We've got some really cursory deck plans here. Obviously, we're not getting full deck plans of this thing. We do have this sort of technical schematic, which is pretty cool. A whole bunch of info on this vessel. One could easily run a naval campaign in Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition. One of the big decisions going into such a campaign would be, well, what's the ship, right? Obviously, well, not obviously, you don't have to do it this way, but probably it's kind of like a shipboard setting, right? So what ship do you pick? I think this ship is too big, frankly. I think this ship is just an enormous ship, but it's really cool that we have extra information on here. Obviously, this thing might contain a flag officer or an admiral leading an entire fleet as well, because this is an enormous vessel. I wonder if we have numbers on how many of these things the Imperium has built. That would be very interesting to see. All right, we do have an index. It is a one-page index, which leads me to think that it's probably not a very good index. However, we do have bookmarks. It's not an amazing array of bookmarks, but it's not bad, and it is a pretty good start. It does kind of look like we get a duplicate set of bookmarks here, which is pretty interesting, and I'm not sure why that would be the case. So, recommendation on this thing. At a glance, this is a whole big product that I feel like I would need to evaluate on its own terms. The book looks pretty good. It is by a respected Traveler author, Martin Doherty, so I feel pretty good about that. I do feel like it probably contains a lot of redundant information that has popped up elsewhere in the Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition line, but it also contains a bunch of material that definitely has not appeared in the Mongoose Traveler 2nd Edition line. So I have picked it up. So, you take that as a recommendation or not. But for the Traveler diehard such as myself, I do think this is a book you'll end up wanting, and it looks pretty spiffy too. Massive thanks to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, whose support and encouragement make what we do at Ardwulf's Lair possible. Thank you, patrons. Links to help support the channel are in the video description, so check out the Patreon, the Ko-Fi, and the merch store, where you can get snazzy Ardwulf's Lair t-shirts, drinking vessels, and other cool swag. There is also an affiliate link for Noble Knight Games in the video description. If you buy stuff through that affiliate link, it helps us support the channel with Noble Knight store credit. Thank you, Noble Knight. Until next time, thanks for watching, and happy gaming.